Hey there, it's Bram Kanstein, and in this episode of Bitcoin for Millennials, I'm joined by Michael Tanguma, who's the co-founder and CEO of Onramp. We dive into how Bitcoin, AI, and energy are converging to reshape finance, why corporate and sovereign adoption could redefine market cycles, and the importance of first principles thinking in navigating this new era. Michael shares his market insights, thoughts on risk, and what's next for Bitcoin as it enters the global mainstream. This is an exciting conversation about how to get ready for a crazy technological future. I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. And if you do, please subscribe and like on YouTube or follow me on your favorite podcasting platform. That will help me to spread the message on Bitcoin even further. Now let's dive into this episode. I wanted to start with something that you've shared with me before, and that is you've been talking about a great awakening that is happening, and that a lot of mental models about money, technology, society are kind of breaking down. And yeah, just want to kind of like start with that. Like, can you unpack the thoughts you have around it, and maybe also, if these mental models are breaking down, what is going to replace them?
Yeah, I think trying to think there's different angles to take it. I think there's one, and we probably feel it in technology, and you specifically on the kind of growth and how you've built your business on the podcast side, and in a lens for technology and where it's heading. That it like compounds when you start to understand these tools and leverage them. And there's a lot of people going to be kind of left behind that, and that's a very small angle. But when you think about working in the traditional world and having a certain set of toolkit, and you really can't move outside of that. And we see this when we try to hire individuals at OnRamp. And I remember this specifically back in the day when we were supposed to be helping on the work side at WeWork with McKinsey. And I just remember this viscerally, like going into a presentation with them, and they were like, they saw fire for the first time when they saw Google Slides, and that you can in real time audit and edit, or you can edit. And you think about those individuals, like imagine them today, like there's no way they're using AI tools. There's no way they're like compounding all these things. It's just like their brain got stuck, and I don't know what it is. And so I think that there's this thing that's happening where some are, they're compounding. You kind of see this in the Bitcoin space, and there's something to do with truth seeking and efficiency. But then where I struggled to tie it back was on what we were just chatting about, which is Bitcoin being a common sense test. And it's this notion that independent of if you have all this baggage from the traditional world and you're 45 years old and you know what money is in real estate, it's like at the end of the day, if you're 5 years old and you say to the little girl or boy, do you want a unit that has a fixed supply or one that can infinitely be created? They're going to pick the one that has some scarcity to it. And so it's like, well, what does it look like as the older individuals, these cohorts that refuse to kind of like, adopt or can't, maybe it's they can't. And this new wave, it's like ultimately gets to Bitcoin as kind of inevitability. But then the last thing, and what you didn't get to talk about on the other pod, and I wanted to bring up, you told me to say, was I still haven't fully wrapped my head around this. Somebody in your listener group definitely has, because you have a very big, following. Is you kind of see this in like biblical texts, and there's different aspects of this. Like Noah's Ark was an aspect where you could only save so many people. There's only so many people that were going to like actually get on and then understand, and then they kind of rebuild. And then similarly with I think it's Moses taking individuals or the Israelites out of Egypt, I believe, and then from Pharaoh, and then they had to go through the desert for 40 years, and only so many people made it in, which were the younger people. And so it's a fascinating dynamic on this great awakening. I don't know if everyone's meant to see it, and then you kind of feel it around you, where there's some people you can talk to about Bitcoin. There's some people that get it.
No, I like that. I don't know if it happens in a very conscious way. It's more like, okay, if I'm talking for myself, like my interest is peaked. I'm just studying, I'm finding more connected subjects. And yeah, you create a view of where the world is going. And I think in a sense you're trying to protect yourself as well, right? Because it feels like, yeah, if you don't adapt, it's like adapt or die. And I think people know that instinctively, and that is, of course, a big part of nature. But when you look at the speed of every technological innovation, it's going faster. Like the adoption is going faster, whether it's voluntary or not. right? Because eventually the people in another podcast we had just now on the broadcast, we talked about the gunpowder example that Safety the Moose talks about. It's like, yeah, you have to adopt something at some point, or else you will literally die. In the gunpowder example. And I think along the way, like if you didn't have the internet, you didn't die. If you didn't have, a voicemail at home, or what's that, like an answering machine at home, you didn't die. If you didn't get like a digital newspaper, you didn't die. But like AI is going to be is a big threat. I don't know if you follow Adam Livingston. I'm going to have him on the pod. He talks a lot about AI and Bitcoin, and he has an amazing video that we're going to dissect on the pod. It's called like the Great Harvesting, and he talks about how humans have secured their economic prosperity and their path towards the future by applying their intellect in different ways. But now your intellect is going to get demonetized by AI, basically, which is eventually going to be free. So how do you adjust to that? So that's kind of how I'm looking at it. Like, this is the first real, almost like existential technological progression that we're running against, that you have to be aware of, or you're going to be left behind. And when you meet people that also see that something is happening, it's very stimulating, if I'm talking for myself, to just learn from that. Like, hey, how can other people help me to survive towards the future? That's kind of where my mind is at. Yeah.
One aspect that you just keyed on that reminded me of something I read earlier was about like the difference between knowledge and wisdom, where you can hear somebody pontificate, they go to school and they sound very knowledgeable. And you can kind of conflate in a world today. We talked about this on the last pod too, about, Senator Warren or these other people that sound knowledgeable, but they have no wisdom. Like, and wisdom comes from just action. And so I think that's where you're referencing this all goes, is you can understand, like, knowledge is democratized. Everyone has access to everything now, but the wisdom comes from repetition and, kind of getting punched in the face, metaphorically speaking. You got to go out in the world and do things, and you can't actually you can't produce that. And so I think that ties into ultimately like Bitcoin and accountability, because you have to produce things. If you're going to have a push, it's a push system. So you have to have somebody send you the Bitcoin and produce some kind of value. And it's a very scary thought for a lot of individuals. I think UBI is picking up more and more because, to your point, a lot of jobs are going to be displaced. And I know there's a common narrative of like, well, we got rid of the horse and then you get a car and more things are produced. And I do think there's some truth to that. But I think this is the first real kind of ultra like disruptive, deflationary like technology that is going to leave a lot of people displaced. And there's going to need to be like societal like refactoring of how do you actually make sure people don't starve. So I think that's where that kind of ties in, and the whole Bitcoin AI thing is there.
Here, I feel like this is really going to show the brutality of not only technological advancement, but in a sense also, just nature, like your adaptability. Like you have to do it, or else other people will figure it out for you. Even the UBI example, right? Like conceptually, I think conceptually it's a great idea if you think about like abundance for everyone, etc. I don't know if that should be UI. Maybe it's just UBI. Maybe it's just accessibility to all the basic necessities to just have a life, for example, that is free, or just very, very accessible. But I feel AI is just like it's a crazy threat. So it's going to force you to change your mental models of how comfortable you're having it in the world, etc. Like the need to adapt, I think, is being reintroduced, and that is going to be very difficult for people. But how do you look at that, like practically? So if we talk about this convergence of Bitcoin, AI, and energy, how do you look at or envision how these will interact to kind of like reshape and change everything that we know, whether that's financially or economically, or whatever you want to touch upon?
Yeah, I mean, I think the one that I'm most interested or think deeply about, because I see it, like a lot of these things I think we talk about, they sound theoretical, but a lot of times individuals are already building. It's that whole notion of the future's here. It's just not evenly distributed.
Bitcoin custody is evolving, and Onramp is leading this change with multi-institution custody, eliminating single points of failure. Instead of relying on one institution, Onramp secures your Bitcoin in a cold storage multi-sig vault backed by 3 independent custodians, where no single party can move your funds alone, providing an unprecedented level of security. Your assets are protected by a 100 million Lloyd's of London insurance policy, with all transactions fully auditable on-chain and only executed at your direction. This means complete transparency and control over your assets at all times. Beyond custody, Onramp provides comprehensive Bitcoin services that include trading, lending, inheritance planning, and IRAs. You can view them as your private Bitcoin banking partner tailored to your wealth preservation goals. Whether you're new to Bitcoin or an experienced holder, Onramp's approach helps you secure your generational wealth with unmatched security and peace of mind. You can sign up at onrampbitcoin.com and use code BRAM, that's BRAM, to receive $150 in Bitcoin after your first deposit. If you first want to learn more, you can also book a free consultation via their website to speak with one of their Bitcoin custody experts. Tell them you came through me, and they'll take extra good care of you. Bitcoin is financial sovereignty, so why compromise when you need liquidity? Meet Debify, the Bitcoin-backed lending platform made by Bitcoiners for Bitcoiners. Debify connects you to institutional-grade liquidity and allows you to borrow fiat or stablecoins, all while keeping your Bitcoin 100% under your control with a non-custodial 3 out of 4 multi-sig escrow solution. Get competitive rates from a global marketplace of institutional-grade lenders, with loan terms that you choose, from 1 month up to a year. There are no hidden fees and there is no rehypothecation, just pure Bitcoin-aligned lending with the highest level of transparency and security. Are you ready to unlock liquidity without ever selling a single sat? Go to debify.com/Bram, that's BRAM, to check out their current lending offers. That's debify.com/Bram.
And I'm not smart enough to be on the like physics side. And everyone talks about like the state of entropy and like how the world, wants to always like move into that framing. But the core idea that I think about is the world wants to be more efficient. Like that's just that's the law of nature. And if that's true, well, we've been very inefficient because the cost of capital, the number of units, the false pricing signal and pricing mechanism has been false. And what happens is Bitcoin changes that because ultimately people now chase a unit with a fixed supply. They want more of that. And so at the end of the day, they want to do more with less. That's just from a micro example of an individual and their spouse at home into starting businesses. And again, this is how Onramp kind of came about. And also the venture fund early riders is this notion of like, oh my God, we're actually running laps around things, because if you have everyone bought in that we're all partners in this, we all own equity in a business, and the more efficient we build, the more units we get. People can't compete with that because they're usually looking at like, loftier salaries, and they're looking at, the bonus, and so you think about it as that, but like, how does this relate to a publicly traded company? Everyone or anybody that's worked at a large firm knows the amount of insane bureaucracy. This is where I like suffocated at the Googles and WeWorks of the world, because you can start off really hot, hot and heavy there and really scale. But there's always, as businesses grow, the pork and the nepotism and all these things that exist at large organizations that keep it from actually achieving its end results. Because when you have too much money, it just drowns out all the soundness and all the unit economics. And so where this ties back to an application, it goes back to what we talked about with Brian on it's bullish for merchants to be accepting Bitcoin. It's bullish for people to be accepting Bitcoin and recognize it for what it's worth. Because when those world-class people understand this, and then they understand that their companies are effectively like done and they don't know it yet because they can't actually pivot fast enough, versus if they left and started a business that was 100 times more efficient with 1/100th of the capital, that's how we rebuild this world. And then it ties back to what we talked about in the purpose of Bitcoin is to give you room and space to really like do what you were meant to do. That's the key, is meant to do. Like that's the huge insidious problem of like the money. It is it's shackles, it's slavery, because ultimately you're told to go to school, and then you're told to get to college, and you have the student debt, and then you got to get the job, and you got to and you're just shackled, and you don't even know why. And then to your point about the real estate, you wake up and you're like, I have this huge portfolio of real estate. Why? You're like, I don't know. And your life's gone. And so the second that somebody has the space and room to really think and do what they were designed to be on this planet Earth for, that's when society really starts to flourish. And so I don't know where I stand with him today because, whatever they're doing in Nakamoto, but like Bailey had this really great quote a while ago, and it's like the real party starts when the dollar ends. And I really thought that was very profound, because that's what that's really implying, is like we can actually go to where we're supposed to as a species when we get rid of like these shackles on everyone's productivity.
Yeah. I mean, I do think that is also where the shock is, because when the dollar is gone, if we get to a place where there's a real free market competition of monies, that will also force a real free market economy of people.
Ideas.
Ideas. Yes, ideas. That's a better one. Yeah, right. Which, in essence, is actually how I look at the world. Is like it's a war of ideas. Right? Everyone has access to the infinite amount of ideas, and sometimes you receive an idea, but it can only exist in the world if you do something with it. And it's funny because this has been something that I've been thinking about. I was talking with a friend, and we were talking about, even an idea as Kentucky Fried Chicken exists in the world. What a weird idea. The first time this guy had that idea, I'm going to make something that is called Kentucky Fried Chicken, and you have like buckets of fried chicken and milkshakes and stuff. Like, what a dumb idea, right? But there's probably ideas that we would judge to be better, but people didn't do anything with them, if that makes sense, right? So Colonel Sanders actually did something with his idea, and he manifested it in the world. Whatever you think of Kentucky Fried Chicken, but the point is more, even an idea that is Kentucky Fried Chicken can exist in the world if you do something with it, right? And where I want to go is that competition of who is actually trying to manifest their idea into the world is going to be way harder, way stronger, because I agree with you, right? Like the internet gave everyone all the information. Now AI is giving everyone all the productivity. So even people that thought they would never have access to this global marketplace of ideas now have access, and they can build anything they want. So it's going to be way more about speed and adaptability and stuff like that. And again, that's why I think this is kind of like is going to be a shock, because that is something that even in Western societies where we think we have free capitalism and a free market and stuff like that, something like this has never existed before. And this is instantly on a global scale, especially if you take into account Bitcoin, for example. If you use that as a medium of payment, like it doesn't matter anymore where the person who created a certain product resides. If you can pay them with, a global decentralized money, then yeah, that productivity could be exported to any place in the world.
Yeah. Ideas. I mean, this is a complete aside, but like ideas are interesting, right? Because they're almost like divinely, there's something like higher power or something sends it to you. And then it's similar to like, if you know you should go to the gym, it's up to you if you actually cultivate it and do it, or whatever you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
It's very similar if you act on the idea, but these ideas, it's weird when it pops in your head and it feels like an unlock. But anyway, this something that I don't think we've talked about, but it ties into what you shared, is this notion of like Moore's law and Metcalfe's law. So like Metcalfe's law naturally is like I forgot if it's Don Metcalfe, but it's like Ethernet squared. So it's like the connections of the amount of people in a user network extrapolate or grow that network and the value around it. And then Moore's law is obviously being able to do more with less. And you think about semiconductors and chips getting smaller and smaller and more efficient with capital. And so when you think about those two combined, that's where billions and billions and maybe trillions have been made in software and technology and the proliferation for the past 20 to 30 years. But if you take those two directional angles of, doing more with less, and then connectivity, well, you can layer in Bitcoin and AI, that they don't sit aside from them. They get basically like they sit together, because AI is that version of Moore's law, because you can do much more with less. And these models and a lot of the software will be able to run with a lot less compute and individuals. And then the Metcalfe's law is Bitcoin because of the connectivity aspect. So if you're in any country on the planet Earth, now your delivery of services and software is available to any other place on the planet Earth. And when you take those two on this side, these two on this side, that both are like accretive, it's not 1 + 1 = 2. It's, 1 + 1 = 10 to, whatever. And that's super fascinating to think about in like growth networks.
Yeah, this is a video that I still want to make, like have a discussion with an AI to talk about, would you rather adopt a money to exchange value with other AIs that's controlled by no one or controlled by humans? Like I think it makes perfect sense that the AIs will transact in Bitcoin in a decentralized currency that no one else can influence, just because AIs are just computers in that sense. Like they should make the most rational decision. So that's something I still would love to explore, to see if the AIs actually agree with that, or if they actually go for something that is maybe less voluntary, for example. So yeah, I like what you said about this convergence. I see that happening too, in a technological way, but also in a way that if there's going to be a shock with AI, and this global productivity, how do you protect yourself? As in, how do you create time and space to figure out what the hell is next for you, if that makes sense, right? So, and we talked about this before, but fiat money gives you more uncertainty towards the future, where Bitcoin lowers your uncertainty towards the future. Well, if you know that there in general is going to be more uncertainty towards the future, now, Bitcoin is, in my opinion, the only way to protect yourself for this coming shock. So you actually have time and space to kind of like make sense of it, and see if you can create a path forward for yourself as well.
Yeah. I mean, I'm curious, like, where you think this goes, in the sense of, like, there's a deflationary aspect, and I mentioned UBI not because I'm in favor of it or against it. It feels like the changes are going to be so dramatic that things that are going to need to be developed that we've never seen before. And like an example of this is because there will be an increased cost of capital. It won't be a false cost. It won't be 0%. It won't be 6% or whatever the Fed funds rate is today. It's going to be whatever Bitcoin's, growth rate is, or appreciation on an annualized basis of productivity. Most people aren't prepared for that, because we've seen those, like, again, it's directionally, but like, remember in 2020 and 2021 during COVID, and they had the product manager that was at the like pool, and she was making her under $50,000, not doing much.
Yeah,
Like,
the two women. Yeah.
there's a big part of society that just actually forgot how to produce value at an efficient scale. And if we think about deflationary tools like AI, and then also individuals that are able to compound that growth, so one person may be able to do the work of 100 or 1,000. That's where society goes. If you're chasing a singular unit that has a finite supply, like it's just, again, self-preservation, because if another tool is going to charge a little bit less Bitcoin, you're going to not be able to compete with the other company. So it's just, you're going to need to be able to do more with less. But again, if the individual is used to this world, the way I liken it is like going to a different planet. They're just not going to be able to breathe, because I've seen this. Like, I've worked with them. I've tried to hire them. It just doesn't work. And so I'm just curious, like, how do you think about that? Because that's the thing that seems very scary, is that, like, you take not only this aspect in the workplace, or just how do you generate wealth, but then the fact that, like, we've been in a world for the past 100 years of an inflationary currency, and now people are going to have to manage the fact that, like, this thing's a fixed supply. And how do you think about preserving that capital? It's a new world that I don't think people are prepared for.
Yeah, that's why I call it a shock. I think it's a shock, but I'm actually looking at it in a very positive, maybe it's a bit utopian way, but let's say it like this. I think there's a shock. I think many people will not be able to handle it. Just what you said, I think, is very true. And if you listen to people, I don't know if you listen to there's a podcast with Tim Ferriss and Chris Sacca, where they talk about AI in the future, and like, would you send your kids to law school or finance school? And Chris Sacca just says, "Fuck no!" Like, this is all dead. Like, he actually talks about a commencement speech he did, where he just tells all the graduates, like, everything you worked for is done. So I don't know where you're going, but where you think you're going is non-existent anymore. That's a huge shocker, of course. And I think it also depends on your age. So on one side, I think it's going to be very hard for a lot of people. I also think on the other side, maybe the caveat is, if you protect yourself with Bitcoin to create the time and space to actually have the optionality to kind of take a step back and figure out, okay, what is going on here, and how am I going to operate in this world, you actually have an opportunity to figure out what would I actually enjoy. Why am I here? How can I add value to the world? And if you, the video of these product managers in the pool being like, yeah, I'm a product manager at a growth startup, or I don't know, I don't even know what they're saying. Yeah, do you think they really enjoyed that? Probably they're like, yeah, I'm in the pool and I'm making 150 or 200K a year, so that sounds great. But yeah, is it eventually about money? Do you really think you're adding value? So I think people will be forced to start asking these questions, which in general I would say it's a good thing. I don't think it's going to be easy, but I do think it's a good thing. I actually look at it as kind of like a possibility to enlighten yourself a bit.
Yeah, it's a good point. Like that, if abundance is unilateral or across the board, then you start to like money doesn't necessarily become this. I think if
what you need, yeah.
What you need in such a large focus, because I feel like there's a lot of gaslighting that goes around that people say the economy is good in the US. It's like not good. It's just that it's good for if you sit in very small pockets of the United States. And so money just becomes a big thing because most people don't have it. One thing that I want to flag to you, because I've been thinking about it more and more, and we're looking at a company. I don't know if it'll be this company, but I think you'll appreciate it because now you're a father and multiple children and bright children. This is going to sound a little bit controversial, but like there's a notion of where there was child labor laws, like people, like kids don't work, right? If you're 5, 7, 15, even like under 15. And a lot of it stemmed back from the industrial age. And, if you went to work, they put them in there, they lost a finger. But imagine 5 to 15, kids are going to be able to really produce a lot of value, and they should, because given that they're going to be digitally native, they're going to be able to go online, and nobody really taps into that today. There's no real like platform. There's no ability for them to grow and learn what they care about and come into that. So if you take that just like small notion, and then I thought deeply about it for a while of just schooling being really messed up. Personally, I think about like high school in the US. It's just a big issue because you go in there, it's state run, it's not really productive. And then it ultimately feeds you into what's, I think, was the ultimate like debt slavery is college. And then you get stuck with 4 years of debt, not learning anything, right? And so I've always kind of been interested in, well, what if like high school was like a business run enterprise? In the first 2 years, you got like the basics, and the next 2 years was almost like a trade where you had to like learn whatever you were most interested in for each quarter. You would switch, or every 6 months, so the calendar year. But it was run like a private enterprise, because then you would be like a placement into the company because they would be producing these most efficient thing. And then if you were just like a shithead in whatever, your parents could pay for you to go to this school or pay more. But you see where I'm going, like it turns into something that actually has to produce an outcome. And then the last part is there really is no marketplace for vibe thinkers. This is just a new term. It's like, how does somebody create a portfolio if they do content marketing, tooling, software? Like there's no way to just like look at Brahm and see the repository of work that he's done. And if I'm at Coca-Cola and I want you to take over 1,000-person thing. And so we're looking at a company that's kind of like tying some of these themes together. And then obviously Bitcoin would fit into that because you can be able to, be paid globally, and you can even gamify some of the educational content. But I think this is some of the stuff that helps support what you're describing of, in a world of abundance, you're going to naturally need to cultivate people from very early ages to figure out what they're good at, get them involved. And it just changes the dynamic between work and life.
If you want to self-custody your Bitcoin stack, I recommend the Blockstream Jade Plus. I've been using this premium Bitcoin-only hardware wallet for a few months now, and I love its design and ease of use. What makes it stand out is its open source hardware and software, and Blockstream's unique genuine check, which makes sure that your device is authentic. No backdoors or compromises. You can connect with the Jade Plus however you want: Bluetooth, USB-C, or you can go fully air-gapped with its built-in camera for cable-free QR transactions. The metal case feels solid and the color screen is easy to read, and it connects with your favorite Bitcoin apps like Blockstream Green, Sparrow, and Electrum. Get your Jade Plus today at store.blockstream.com and use code BRAM to get 10% of your entire order. let's talk about something that not a lot of people think about before it's too late. Where are you storing your Bitcoin seed words? Are they truly secure? I found my solution with StampSeed. It's an elegant all-in-one titanium plate solution with no separate pieces to lose or manage. Your seed phrase gets permanently stamped into pure titanium that withstands fire, survives water, and lasts for generations. Unlike shallow etching methods, StampSeed's patented tools help you to deeply stamp every letter for permanent readability, protecting your financial legacy. When you order a titanium seed plate from StampSeed, you can also upload a custom design or your logo to customize the back of your plate to make it fully personalized. Paper seed phrases are a disaster waiting to happen. Secure your Bitcoin with StampSeed for decades to come. Visit stampseed.com and use code BRAM, that's BRAM, to get 15% off your order. I like that. I think that ties into how the future is just going to be different. Like really different in the sense that if you have young children now, all your ideas around school and education and job and stuff like that, however you thought about it before for your child or your future child, like everything that is our experience is probably dead. So as a young parent, you have to adjust to actually understand, I think, what is dead, but also how you can adjust. And so I think there's an interesting idea there, especially in general. I think we should listen more to children because the children have unpoisoned minds, right? And in general are very smart in my experience, just in general, like children have very innovative ideas, right? So if you can help them cultivate that mind, I think that would be very, very beneficial, especially if, and I wonder what you think, if you align. So my idea is, the robots are going to build robots, and the AI is going to build AI, is going to build AI. So like that pace is only going to accelerate, and just keeping the existential threat case of, AGI with a 300 plus IQ becoming our overlord, matrix, whatever, which I think has a non-zero probability, but we'll see where that goes, right? If we keep it positive, like it's only going to accelerate. It's going to be faster and faster. So like our children's lives are going to be different again. So I think that's going to compress like that rate of change. So even how we, even the ways that we could help our children now will probably not be how our children are going to help their children. And so I think, yeah.
I would say yes and no there. I'm glad you brought that up. For the first part is not to get dark or morbid, but there's something to the fact that it's so hard to see. I think we're both struggling to understand how the future looks, that there is a non-zero chance that it all just ends because it's all like that insane from when you think about the level of acceleration that people we don't even know how to fathom. But let's stay positive in that it doesn't. I think that there is a deep notion. I've been thinking about this deeply. That's why I kind of reference this is as we get older, people start passing away, right? And you think about like some of your memories or stories you heard from grandparents and other individuals, and you put your like mind into where they went. Whether I like to think about like in a saloon and sitting around and the wisdom and the tales and the stories that are told, those stop to like move if we don't tell them anymore, right? Like they kind of die off with them. And I remember being told when I was younger, and then you hear them, and now you have a son, and you think about like, it's your job almost to relate those stories and that timeless wisdom, because as we change, it's even more important to not forget that these things, there are certain truths that will be true forever. And that's how what's always kind of changed. Now we're probably accelerating faster, but I think that's an important function. And I think that is what will give people the ultimate edge and opportunity, because that's really how you can like win in life, is that you have a base. You have to have an arc, like an anchor point, and then everything else revolves around that, versus everything's up for grabs. This is like the open border policy. It's like if everyone's open borders there, then it's like, well, what's our nationality? Like, who are we? What's all those things? And anyway, this is what tied back to the last pod and why I didn't immediately call out, but it goes into the corporate treasury and all that, the the buying of those assets. It's like nobody really understands like what they're doing here and why they're chasing money. And if they understood why they're chasing it, to your point in self-preservation, then you would ultimately say, well, I want the thing that provides me the lowest risk, to be able to hold that. And all that's embedded in everything that's publicly traded holding Bitcoin is by the definition of risk. You have execution risk, custody risk, all these things. And so like, that's the big problem here, is that most people don't even understand what they're chasing. So they get excited about these things. And there's a lot of wealthy people, similar to the real estate friends that you referenced. I'm like, well, why are you doing this? It's like, if you ask some of these people, like, I don't actually know why. So anyway.
I think the don't actually know why is in general, of course, what we are talking about with regards to understanding Bitcoin first, right? It's just this intricacy of, well, yeah, the stories that have been told to us. I think we actually had to shed off some of that stuff before we could understand Bitcoin, right? And maybe this is actually with each generation, like the parents tell their children something that has worked for them, or how they've looked at life and what's helped them along the way, right? But as just, I think the core of it is as technology progresses, it opens up the world even more, or in AI's case, the productivity and the economy and this free market of ideas, that the perspective that we have now is just something that is just irrelevant when our children are 35. Like, that perspective is just totally outdated. And maybe this is just always the way it goes. Actually, maybe we are talking in a circle, and people listening are like, yeah, this is always how it goes, right? Like, when we get older, we can't really look at the world in the same way anymore. It's like each generation is kind of like a paradigm shift in that sense. But because it's going faster and faster, I think it will demand a constant, a constant effort to try to understand where are we actually going.
Yeah, I think that this ties a little bit into the previous topic of like uncharted territories. I think we're definitely in uncharted territories when it comes to this cycle and where we go from here. I'm increasingly thinking we go much higher than anybody's expecting. TBD on what the downturn looks like, given leverage and froth in the system that will come with it. But when we think about just this steady demand from these corporate treasuries coming in globally, and that's not coming in a vacuum. Like you see this on Twitter and you see this in the mempool. Like, there's not anybody really from a transaction perspective, especially for the price at 105K, using Bitcoin at levels that you would expect in like all-time high period. And then I've been saying this for the past like 2 years. Anecdotally, there's not a lot of demand from net new buyers. And like an anecdote that my wife told me yesterday was that she works for a big tech company, and at some all hands or something, they were talking about fads and like how AI wasn't a fad like other things, and they referenced crypto. And the boss or the person was like, somebody like chimed in, right? There's a Bitcoiner there. They're like, well, Bitcoin's 105K. And he's like, oh, not like Bitcoin or whatever. Like, people don't even know that this thing's sitting at this level. And so I think that's the thing, that like people that listen to this podcast in our groups, we're in this like super bubble that the rest of the world doesn't even know Bitcoin is at like this 100K price point. If they do, they still think it's all like a Ponzi. And it leads me to believe that this cycle, if we're still in cycles, it's going to play much into end of 2026, if not longer, or we're just in a new uncharted territory. And I think we are, because of the SBR stuff. I think that's like the final positioning. If you have sovereign stacking, then that downward pressure, like they're not stacking to go into, like, what are you going back into? Dollars, stable coins? Like, the only thing you're really buying is probably land. And that's where like I anchor. I know we kind of have, we prod each other about this, but I always anchor to the gold stuff, because you can look at like what Tether and those guys, they just are seeing around corners, and what their balance sheet looks like is BTC, gold, and land. So like, as Bitcoin runs and you realize those gains, what are you really doing with them? Is really, are you buying land, or are you going to diversify into gold? But you're really not trading it for more dollars, when historically that had been the pair. You're trying to get more dollars. So I think we're just, to your point, we're just in a different place. I don't think anybody's prepared for it, including us.
No, I think that's a great answer. That's why this is obviously also so entertaining to follow. Don't you think?
Yeah, because it's like it truly is entertaining to follow, because I think the definition of happiness is or like, I'm not making this one up, but like the definition I thought of was, you remember growing up when you were a kid and you had to go to school for the first day, or there was something exciting, you woke up excited. Like, that's the definition of, I think, what everyone tries to get to, is you wake up and you're excited to go to work. And that's part of what you're saying here, is that we're just like in uncharted territories. We're right smack in the middle of it. We get to participate in it. Like, what better timeline could you ask for?
I know. Yeah, it's insane. It's so crazy that when I think about this, right, like the fact that we are getting to live through this is insane. Just to have studied it, seeing it, just like I feel like I'm having a chair, like a seat in a stadium, and I'm just like watching it unfold. You know, like it's every day I still learn something new.
And participate is the key. Like, I think that this is the biggest thing, and I'll shout forever, because I didn't understand this, was nobody has any idea normally what they're doing in the real world. They definitely don't know what they're doing in Bitcoin. Like, it's just absolutely true. There's no shortage of 10 different angles, not to pick on anybody. They have no clue, but they're looked at as the leader in whatever respected area in Bitcoin. And if that's the case, and somebody's smart and understands this and comes from their professional experience while also deeply understanding Bitcoin, because you have to understand Bitcoin, your idea is very paramount and should be acted on, because you can actually influence the trajectory of whatever that area of expertise. And so people should do that, because the sooner they do that is the sooner they're going to benefit, the world benefits, Bitcoin benefits. And that's like what makes this exciting, is you're not just watching it, you're participating by having these conversations, sparking ideas, maybe building businesses. And that's the exciting part, is you can actually participate. You're not just viewing. When historically in the fiat world, you just get to watch like what the lizards are doing.
Yeah. Now, you've also been talking about corporate adoption being either the greatest asymmetric bet to the upside or the downside. And I just really wanted to ask you about that, what you think about that. I mean, people are talking about, you know, Bitcoin Treasury companies are the ICOs of this cycle, etc. I have quite a different idea. I think crypto killed itself with pump.fun. You know, like there's a million new tokens a week or a month, I don't even know. And the more serious game of creating new and exciting type of investments that you know, I don't see Bitcoin as an investment, but a Bitcoin Treasury company is definitely an investment. That actually comes from the Bitcoin Treasury company. So I think this is like an unlock for the people that are interested in Bitcoin or crypto broader, and in connection to the existing, you know, fiat financial system. I actually think that the treasury companies are just a very novel new thing that people that like trying to get an edge or follow certain investments could actually have fun with and benefit from. You know, I'm not a crazy trader, so I'm not participating in that. But that's kind of how I look at it. But you're either this is up or crazy down.
Yeah, I think that the lens of the treasury companies, I really enjoy. My favorite part about the treasury company craze is it's going to expose everyone that actually understands Bitcoin and where this goes, and that didn't. And with the one caveat that there's a non-zero chance that this goes up and to the right, and then everything I'm about to say, I'm completely stupid and wrong about. And for that to happen, meaning the treasury companies all adopt Bitcoin, then every other company adopts Bitcoin, and it goes up and to the right, and these companies have some nominal value over Bitcoin, and you could trade those shares for BTC and you make money and first people in. Like, I think that's the thesis. It discounts two things. So for that to happen, it means that there's no more humans running the companies, and that there's no more hacks or any bad things that happen, because ultimately humans are humans, and there's a reason why it's called animal spirits. And ultimately, as leverage comes into the system and these companies have to compete with each other, they'll naturally blow themselves up. This is just like 101 business cycles. The other side of it, it's discounting that we'll never see any other hack or insolvency or something bad happen to the underlying, where for 15 years, if you centralize the underlying asset, it ends up. And so if those two things don't happen, sure, this is that, but what's the chance of that? And now the downside is ultimately, it goes back to what we talked about in the beginning of they prey on like the naivete of the individual understanding equities, and to your point, being exciting. The sad part about Bitcoin's 100K is that it makes a lot of people feel like they missed the boat, or they missed the boat on the appreciation. And so that's where you see this nihilism that's existed, whether it's with, the proliferation of trading, or it was trading, but also like gambling. And so people look for the next equity or the next 100 bagger. And what we talked about in the previous pod and a little bit earlier here is the reason money exists is to give, it's a intermediary good that captures the individual's productivity and is meant to be used to give optionality into the future. Like, the person already went out on the risk curve because they had to develop, and they got up in the morning to go hunt the wolf, build the business, go do whatever they did. They already were on the risk curve. So then now you have the money, you store it in something that's not speculative. And then it increases your optionality to invest in yourself in other productive endeavors, or to provide for you and your family. That's what money is. That's not what any of this other stuff is. And so that's the reason why the meme is stay humble, stack sats, is you stay humble, you stack the hard money, it grows in purchasing power, and you live your life better off. What this other stuff is fundamentally the opposite of it. It's speculation, it's risk, but it's being conflated as the underlying. And the common narrative when people bring this up is, oh, well, it's an exposure vehicle. It's all a lie. It's just a charade to explain that to people, because it eerily reminds you of like, oh, I'm going to build a casino because somebody else is going to build a casino. So I might as well like capture it. Or I'm going to build a gambling app because somebody else is going to build a gambling app. It's like, no, that's not the right response, because ultimately you're going to be shown for what it is. It's no, you build productive tools and services that can allow for people to get into that right thing. And that's where the value will ultimately accrue. And so that's where I reference, it's like the last part to put like just weight behind that is, it's illogical for people, once they understand Bitcoin, to not actually get out of these treasury positions. Because again, the common thought that the big people will say is the most sophisticated investors can't get access to Bitcoin. So they need my bonds, or they need my, equity. It's like, wait, so you're telling me that these people can't figure out how to get spot exposure? And I believe there's some truth to today. They don't understand Bitcoin, so they buy these proxies. But by definition of, as long as they get educated and grow their knowledge base, like which all Bitcoin holders do, they're going to want the thing that reduces the counterparty risk. Because mind you, while this is happening, these companies are blowing up, and there's exchange hacks, and there's geopolitical risk. If you have a treasury company in Bahrain or wherever it is, and they decide that this is competing with the local currency, well, what's the first thing you can do is just go seize the servers or wherever the Bitcoin's stored. When that happens, people are going to start to actually underwrite what these treasury companies are. And then on the micro level, it's the same thing. It's like somebody buys this equity, and then they're like, oh, wait, why am I not just holding the underlying? And then I guess maybe the last part is like the volatility on these things is going to be absolutely insane, and people can't even handle Bitcoin's volatility, and that's just money, and that's a thesis of long-term storage. So how are you going to hold some of that? So all this together, it's just nobody's incentivized to tell this story, because people get excited about just like buying this stuff, and then even if people kind of know it, they own positions in these companies. Mm-hmm. So then they have to support the thesis. It's the same thing with Ethereum. When you try to tell people that got Bitcoin but also Ethereum, it's like, no, it's binary. It's either one or nothing. They'll be like, well, my treasury company is good because it does X, Y, or Z.
Yeah, it's I think this is why it's also hard to kind of prepare for the future, because there's all these shiny things that you can do right now, right? And when you think about, stay humble, stack sats, and just chill, sit in your seat and wait for the future, right? I mean, I'm really enjoying that, but I also know that that's not for everyone, right? So there is always like a certain temptation to, I don't know, like be distracted with the shiny things of today. I think there's a natural thing there, but in general, again, if we go back to the idea of survival of the fittest, or adapt or die, there's challenges with every choice that you make, right? And I think again, this kind of ties back to if you make this decision in a conscious way, then it's always a good decision in that sense, no matter what the outcome is. But I agree with you, and maybe that's also the technological age that we live in. There's just endless distraction, right? There's endless distraction. I mean, when I discovered Ethereum at $7, I was like, "Holy shit! This is going to be the decentralized computer of the universe," or something like that. I mean, it's logical that you find new and shiny things along the way, but the actual effort is in understanding what is the true thing that I should focus on. And once you get there, that's what actually gives you, I'd say, rest or space in your head as well.
That's exactly right. Like that is the wisdom versus the knowledge, because I saw this in when I got into the space in like 2017, 2018. I was living in New York, and I ended up working for the block for a very brief period. And they all thought I was an insane Luddite because I was a Bitcoiner, and they loved everything under the sun, the tokenomics. And it was specifically people from Colombia. That's where a lot of the crypto people that came in from, prominent school in New York City. And it ties to the same theme you're talking about. It's the same type of individual that loves the financialization of this asset and what's happening. It's eerily similar to the tokenomics of how do you like structure a token to accrete value, is very similar to what we're seeing at a higher level with larger liquidity pool, where the real wisdom is the money is meant to be this notion of optionality for you to get the space to do what you were supposed to do, not financialize the products. And that's where, like, Parker has a great piece called the Bitcoin's the great DeFi financialization, right? It's the notion of getting away from this. And so I think that's just the core part that goes back to, and then this goes back, I think where I was referencing, explaining to our children, like just these timeless wisdoms, it goes back to these biblical texts. I'm not like overly religious, but there's a reason why these texts have lasted for thousands of years. And they ultimately break down about like this notion of false idols, and that everyone's chasing these like shiny objects or whatever was in vogue at the time. And they ultimately, over like a long enough time horizon, get smited, or they're just kind of like wiped away because they were missing the signal through the noise, which was pretty straightforward. It wasn't complex, but it's a hard thing to do when groupthink is participating in that. And that's what the groupthink is today, is this like notion of public treasury, its demand, liquidity, all these things that are positive for pumping the bags, but ultimately are going to leave a lot of people with less Bitcoin than they would have ordinarily had. And nobody's really, I think we're going to get more and more people talking about it, because the scary part is really on 105K, and this is happening. I had a call this past week with an individual that owned a bunch of restaurants and felt like he missed the boat. This guy's wealthy, feels like he missed the boat in buying Bitcoin for his corporate balance sheet. And so now wants to go and extend a bunch of leverage, and was just bringing up all these different very like risky concepts. And so that's where I think we go much higher than we expect, but probably also retrace significantly again with the volatility, because I think there's going to be a lot of leverage from the uninitiated. Because like a lot of this stuff, we can have pattern recognition from the past 8 years. And this like looks very similar, just at a larger scale than what we saw previously in crypto. But a lot of people have no idea what happened before. And so they're going to think about leverage, who their counterparty is with custody when they take out loans, to the volatility and the profiles that are created. And it's just going to end up we're going to redo the same things we've done before.
Do you think the cycles then are still in play, or will there be like an 80% drawdown, or 40 or 50? I mean, as you're sharing it now, it seems like you are expecting like a big retrace.
Yeah, I think we probably go higher than we expect, and then we do retrace because of the leverage. I think the thing I don't know what people sell for. So what I think happens is it's not a popular sentiment, but like nobody ever talks about what happened with BlockFi and FTX and all of the people that blew up and where that Bitcoin went, because a lot of people thought they had Bitcoin and it just disappeared. It reminds me of like the capital that goes into the U.S. political system and Ukraine specifically, or Afghanistan. I think there was $2 trillion. We went, and we know a lot of it ends up in different people's pockets. And so FTX, BlockFi, all that, people just wipe their hands. Animal Spirits, Crypto Degen, SBF, and then we go away. And I think similar thing happens here where a lot of money is going to be lost in this next cycle. And then maybe it doesn't get sold for dollars. So it doesn't cause as much of a retrace, but people are going to be like, oh, where did it go? And it blew up and it's somewhere. And I think that's what these large honeypots end up being, is like ways where it gets funneled into, other people's pockets that definitely aren't the people that were putting their dollars and expecting more Bitcoin out of it.
Yeah. In a previous conversation, I think I saw you highlight something about the dangers of groupthink, and especially now that we are talking about like the future, how can you think for yourself, right? Or how do you go back to kind of like first principles thinking? What are kind of like the blind spots that you are noticing? Maybe even in Bitcoin as well, of people that are kind of becoming complacent or maybe lazy in their thinking.
I think it goes back to what we talked about, of like, I think the closer somebody really deeply understands Bitcoin, everything starts to become a lot more transparent or apparent. And it all just ties back to truth. Like, Bitcoin's just a fair ledger. It's the version of meritocracy, accountability, because you have to produce value to get it. And so I think over time, as individuals got Bitcoin, it's easy to romanticize whatever version of the story you like. So if self-custody, self-sovereignty is the thing, and we're all going to be, in our citadels, well, then you stop really thinking past that and thinking about, well, what is the like commercial viability of that? Like, how is grandma going to buy 100% of her wealth there, right? And so like that's part of that, I think, groupthink, where I've been involved in a lot of this. So like I can speak firsthand to believe it, but also just see the blind spots. That's one angle. The other angle is the opposite, which is like, oh, people can't get exposure to Bitcoin, so buy my public treasury because that gives them access. And that's like another version of groupthink, of like just rationally thinking, is this going to end up good for everyone, including myself and my reputation? And so I think those are the notions of like just deeply thinking about like, what's the logical progression? How would these things play out? Where do they go? And in an angle, again, I know it sounds like talking our book, but it's like this notion of multi-institution custody. It's an aspect of like, how could this really play out from a sovereign or individual that actually was accretive and conducive to the network's proliferation? If you saw yesterday, I think the devil's in the details, and they weren't saying they were going to sell or seize their Bitcoin, but it was in California about an exchange. If you leave it there, and then if you pass or you don't touch those assets for 3 years, that the state could take them or take them into possession. But you can see how, if they don't have the ability to, then it kind of kneecaps that proposition, and in general, or taxes, but also, so it's this notion, well, you don't want a single counterparty, whether you're a sovereign or an individual, but you also don't want it all in your house, because if everyone knows Brahm keeps all of his Bitcoin in his house, well, that's not good for him or his family. And there's only really been two options. You have the hardcore Bitcoiner that says, put it on my ledger or whatever and write down my 12 words. Well, that's not really conducive to inheritance and all the things associated. And then the other side of it is like, trust my ETF, my corporate treasury, or my single custodian. And we know how gold failed. And so these are examples of this, of just like really thinking hard and earnestly. Even it's the joke of, do you want to make money or do you want to be right? It's not really those topics. It's more of the notion, do you want to be right and have your version of the world, because you love that version, be the thing and you be hard nosed about it? Or do you just want to like go with what will be commercially viable? Because I think that's like ultimately what is the deciding factor around good entrepreneurs, is around taste, and it's taste for what the market's appetite will be. And that's where Steve Jobs understood that, from the design of the phone all the way to the experience through the application, is you got to like have a good feel for what the market will want. And I think that's like a big thing that's like missing in the Bitcoin space, is just understanding what is relevant, not for us that listen to this pod, but for the next 100 million, the next billion people. Like, what will they actually consume that won't leave them scratching their head, or just rather go into negative yielding bonds or corporate treasuries, because it just makes more sense to do that.
It's funny because to understand Bitcoin, you have to kind of like diverge, right? And really study multiple subjects. But then when you're like totally in Bitcoin, you have to kind of like broaden your scope again to see, how can I help this actually fit into the world, right? Because the first part of going very broad is to understand what is Bitcoin's place in the world, like what is the problem that it actually solves? Why is this problem really bad? Why can't we get out of it in any other way? Right? Okay, so this Bitcoin thing should exist, but then after that, okay, what can I actually do to either get more people onto this thing or build products and services for them that can actually help, I would say, cement Bitcoin's place actually in the world, right? So it's kind of, if we talk in corporate consultant speak, like the double diamond, you know that, so you like you diverge, you convert, you diverge, you convert. So
yeah,
it's like two diamonds next to each other.
I think that's like the epitome of that's like life, right? You zig and zag. And it reminds me of poker. If you've ever played poker, like the best skilled poker players are play loose and tight, because you play tight and the people against you start to believe you're playing too tight, and then you switch to being loose. And then when they think you're playing tight, like that's how you actually win in the game of life. You can't go in deep one direction, because you'll end up with a myopic view of the world. And I think that's, yeah.
So what's a contrarian or underappreciated view you hold about Bitcoin or AI or energy for that matter that you wish more people would consider? And you cannot mention gold. No, I'm kidding.
God, I don't know. I feel like everything. I mean, we do pods all the time. I feel like you hear me talk about enough things that are potentially contrarian. So I don't know if there's any. I feel like everything I kind of said is a little bit taboo at this point.
Or maybe the thing that gets you most pushback or something.
Well, I mean, I definitely think gold and Bitcoin are going to persist much longer than people want or believe, but that's not fun. I think there's something to ultimately, like the energy markets. This would be fun that you'll appreciate. And I still need to read this. It's back here. And because I've only read like a portion of it, but it's called The Prize, The Epic Quest for Oil, Money, and Power. And I'm convinced that book has the answers to everything you just asked, because when you really extrapolate where all geopolitical tensions come to, they have to do with natural resources, specifically oil. And there's a notion that's talked about, it's called the Nakamoto point, where all the oil or energy production starts to hit a 50%, where it's either used for Bitcoin mining or used for civilization and power production. And I think once the markets understand that you can take energy from the ground and then either sell them into, whatever the fiat currency is, or mine it to Bitcoin, you basically, you take out the position for geopolitical tension, because you don't have to do these different trade agreements and different angles. You can basically source it and then turn it into digital oil, which is Bitcoin, and then go. And I think that's something that I haven't fully had the time to think through, but that's where this all goes, is you actually are able to reduce, because that's why the Middle East is the Middle East, right? They have all this money, they have all this natural resources, and everyone's vying for how do they get that energy. Like Arthur Hayes has a really good notion of everything he measures in a barrel of oil. Like he doesn't hold the barrels of oil, but like everything he's measuring when he's making a trade is on the barrels of oil, because barrels of oil are a proxy for human productivity, because you need more petroleum to live. And so it's like, how much is more gold in Bitcoin or in barrels of oil or gold and or other assets. And so I think that's and then AI is that last piece, because we know you need energy for the data centers. And so those things are all about to start to converge together. And it's really hard to see without studying those disciplines and having those backgrounds, but you can't like help but see how they all like intertwine. And then the AI Bitcoin thing is like, Bitcoin's what's going to keep AI from killing us, because you're naturally going to need to it's going to keep it honest, versus being able to plug in and somebody just pay it dollars to do what it needs to do.
So last question to wrap up. What makes you most bullish on Bitcoin's evolving role in the global financial system over the next decade? Let's say until 2033, 2034, when 99% of all Bitcoin has been mined.
I think the truest thing that is so underappreciated is the peer-to-peer stuff. Like if we go down the logical progression of, this is where I'll caveat with the public codes, like everything's good for Bitcoin. So even though I said it's bad for the individual, if the price goes up, that's the ultimate like proxy for awareness. And then people start to learn and they want to receive that asset, right? It's just a logical thing that somebody would want to buy it or accept for their goods and services, that underlying asset. And the notion that me and you can transact without any intermediary is the most bullish thing on the planet Earth, because that means you can't stop it. So as more and more people recognize they want Bitcoin, and their goods and services will either be denominated or accepted in it, that's how this all wins, because it's impossible to stop. It's just like water flowing downhill. And so that's what's most like exciting. It's like it's still starting, because Bitcoin's like a store of value, right? It's not really used as much as we would want or see as an intermediary or a medium of exchange, but that's only going to naturally grow as more people appreciate the underlying and want to be paid in it.
Yeah, I fully agree. I think this is also what many people miss, in a sense, is that this monetary revolution is slow. Like, it's slow. So first, it's store of value, which has like 400 is an opportunity of like 450 trillion, or even 900 trillion if you count everything, right? But that the problem that solves is way more prominent than the need for a better currency to exchange with each other, because for many people that works, right? But keeping the value that the economic value or the purchasing power that you've gathered, keeping that towards the future, lowering your uncertainty towards the future, is a more proficient use case and need that people have now. And so I like what you said, because I think that's also where we are going. But I think there are certain phases that people are very rigid about when they read like the white paper, and it's like peer-to-peer electronic cash, and they're like, yeah, that's what it should be. And then I usually think, like, that's what it already is. Like, I can buy your shirt and send you Bitcoin now. Like, we can already do that. Like, it is that, but the social adoption is just not there, because there are better, air quotes, solutions already available for people, and they don't really understand yet why they would need a better currency as well. So I think many people need patience in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, I know we need to wrap, but that's what you've been bringing up, and I know it's your favorite, and I like it. It's the gunpowder. I think you've probably been all in. I'm assuming you have been, because you have this level of zen, that you've held gunpowder for much longer than everyone else. And what that means is being like, recognizing Bitcoin probably is the vast majority of your wealth and how you store it. And you drastically, disproportionately outpace everyone else, from their return profile to the opportunity set that you've created for yourself versus others. Why I'm bringing this up is because this is what the corporate treasury and a lot of this other stuff has done. Is most people think of Bitcoin as a trade or a small percentage of their portfolio. So they're looking at other proxies to do it, versus understanding this is just money. And it's super like profound and revolutionary that you can buy this thing. It doesn't get debased. It increases in purchasing power. And then you don't have to worry about it anymore. Like, that foundational thing is not absorbed by the market. So they buy little percentages of it. And even the hardest core people that you see on Twitter that are like, thought leaders or people allowed have like 5% or 10, 15%. They haven't come to this understanding that Bitcoin is the thing. And then they can just go back to their life and do it. Because once you get there, you realize the counterparty risk reduction, the aspect of the execution, like everything that Bitcoin's properties have, you're like, well, why would I do anything else other than hold it? And like, obviously money's meant to be spent, so you can do it, but it's not to like make more Bitcoin based on these other things. But people that have smaller position sizing, that's how they think, because they don't understand Bitcoin is the last trade. And so that's like the big like unlock, is, to your point, these people eventually will just wake up that have been mired by hyperinflation and capital controls and money being seized from their banking accounts, realizing how powerful it is to hold this asset, it not be debased, and create purchasing power. They're not going to sell it to get into like MSTR or some pubco, because they might make a little bit more Bitcoin. Like, it's the most insane proposition. And that guy ties back to, it's just a common sense test. But yeah,
I love that. Bitcoin is the last trade. That's a great ender. Well,
there's a good podcast.
That's by that name. Yeah. Check it out. Yeah. Well, thanks again, man. Great conversation. And I hope this will help some people prepare for a future where, Bitcoin and AI will probably reshape everything that we think we know right now. So thanks, brother. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on. It was great.
Cheers. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, you can click here to find more just like it, and click here to find all Bitcoin for Millennials podcast episodes. Also, please like this video if you want to help shine a light on the message of Bitcoin, and subscribe to my channel to stay connected. I hope to see you for a next episode. Bye.